Places have changed, faces have aged. Memories are starting to fade, one day at a time. Remember, I'm here with you. You're trying so hard just to keep up. Every day's a chance to restart. I'll still be here, trying to pull you through. Every word that's forgotten, every note left unsung. Trust in me, just hold my hand and take me with you. Bring me into a world no one else can walk through. Hold my hand, 'cause I'm still with you. Love teaches hope, that love teaches joy, enable the ones who are frozen in time. Imagine our hearts choosing to shine on a journey that's yours and mine, yours and mine. Hold my hand and take me with you. Bring me into a world no one else can walk through. Hold my hand. Hold my hand. 'Cause I'm still with you.
When I was young, you held me near. Storms would pass and I never fear. Your smile and kisses I'd hold so dear helped me to be strong. Remember places we've explored, sights and sounds above us all. Memories you don't recall are those I've not forgot. When we cannot see, doesn't mean we'll get lost. When we cannot hear, it doesn't mean we cannot talk. Those crazy years of fighting are now long gone, and I hope you'll sing to me once more. The
Hi, welcome to the Enabling Festival 2020. I'm Guan, your festival host this year. Now, due to the present pandemic situation, the Enabling Festival 2020 will be traveling into your home. Now, the festival aims to explore, challenge, and shape perceptions and understanding of dementia and caregiving through technology and the creative arts. Now, this year, we will focus on the sense of sight with the theme, Do You See What I See? We have curated many exciting programs for you this year, so please visit us at this website below to see what we have to offer. Now, please enjoy the upcoming program.
I suddenly didn't know where to position my eyes in relation to the road.
It was raining and the light was going straight into your face and you just don't see it properly.
I zigzagged all the way, leaving tire marks.
Going over the pavement, hitting bollards or whatever.
I just thought, what's going on?
What if there'd been someone standing there instead of that bollard? I didn't know there was anything wrong.
Dementia? Why would you think it was dementia? It's so fiendishly complicated. There's how many million neurons involved in visual processing. Once certain neurons stop functioning as well as they would have done, virtually any combination of bits of your visual processing might go.
So the eyes are seeing it, but the brain is not recording it in a little slot back here.
It's an image that your brain's made up from what your eyes have captured. And so if it makes it up wrong, it's then persistent, which is not always true of people with normal Alzheimer's.
An ordinary eye test won't necessarily show much. Because if you're looking at A, B, D, E, F, that's not a problem. But if you're trying to read a line...
I get the first word, and when I go on to the second word, the first word's gone.
Some from this sentence and some from this sentence, and then coming back up to this sentence.
Blobs on a piece of paper. Everything does dance around, all the letters, and eventually it just becomes one big blur. I've read extensively all my life, and I can barely read. I'm writing, crowded page. It's moving, it's mutating, it's everything.
C C C C C H U R C C C C H.
F's instead of fives, B's instead of P's, P's instead of B's. There's a number of funny little things in my brain. And sometimes some do things, and sometimes others do things.
It's very frustrating to go to get something and it's not there, but it's there.
I can often see things faster if they're moving.
And so if a bird flies across his vision, he's got it. He knows what that bird is, he can see it exactly as it was before, because it's dragged his eye to it.
The glare when you're walking along, it's very, very bright.
And there's shadows and reflections or glistening puddles. Is it real? Is it solid ground? Is it something you're going to go down? Going downstairs, I can't see my feet.
I always feel for the first step so I can gauge the rhythm of the stairs.
You do not know where to put your feet, so you get vertigo. It gives you vertigo.
Well, it's like standing on the edge of something that you could just jump.
I can play all the notes, but not necessarily in the right order.
I can make a cup of tea, but if Graham talks to me in the middle of that, I will forget at what stage I was at.
Well, yeah, first of all, I've got to find a cup.
It's almost as though he must be able to see it.
I can see it, but I can't see where it is.
I still couldn't see it. So, where? There. Where? There! There's a real one and there's an image. I can't distinguish between them.
You have to sort of dismiss the whole image somehow and then get it to reassemble the whole thing, and then the kettle might be there again.
Like your reading glasses are in the midst of a load of other things. You can't spot them very easily.
The whole thing, you do see it rather like a Bruegel painting, or a sort of crowded, surreal.
My fingers were like bananas.
I can't use the phone
You
properly.
can remember the code for your cash point, but you couldn't work the machine to put them in the right order.
Oh, yeah, I can see the computer and something will come up on the screen. But, if I press the wrong key, then I'm stuck.
And I can't find my way around the keyboard. I mean, that fumbling for the letters.
He's just pressing more buttons and getting deeper and deeper and deeper into a mess, and he doesn't know it.
I have not, in 5 or 6 years now, had a clear explanation, and I don't think we're giving you one now. What is it that you actually see?
I can see, but I can't see.
It's very hard to describe what somebody sees to somebody else. We might all see this differently, but we would assume we all see it the same. But I can't say, what do you see? Because you're going to look at me and say, well, I see what you see, aren't you? You're going to say, well, I see that. It's such an amazing thing.
Hi, my name is Daniel Lim, and I'm the co-founder of the Enabling Festival 2020. This evening, I'm proud to bring to you director Simon Ball. He is the director of the award-winning film, Do I See What You See? So we're going to start recording, eh?
Yeah.
What are you doing in Berlin?
Yeah, I'm from England. I grew up in southwest England, and I was living in London, and 4 years ago, I just felt like I needed a change, and I had some friends here,
and I've always wanted to live abroad somewhere, to sort of see the world from a slightly different perspective. And I didn't plan on staying here this long, but yeah, after being here for about a year, I sort of felt very much at home, and it's a very easy city to sort of settle into. It's very social. There's a big creative network, and yeah, there's a nice sort of atmosphere and energy. And I mean, it's changing, but it's also a bit cheaper here compared to most European capitals. So there's an economic incentive as well.
Your film, Do I See What You See? Tell us, why did you make this film?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite, it's a bit of a long story, really, which I'll try and keep fairly brief. But before I made the film, I really had no connection at all to the idea of dementia. No one in my family had dementia. I hadn't been close to it. And I actually had a film in a film festival, and they ran this networking event where filmmakers could meet scientists and academics with a view to sort of building collaborations between sort of the academic world and the sort of creative filmmaking world. And I met this scientist, Sebastian Crutch, who is a leading researcher at the Dementia Research Centre in London. And he specifically was researching rare dementias, and more specifically posterior cortical atrophy, which is the dementia that the specific strain of dementia that features in my film. And I mean, even after meeting him, we had a really nice conversation, and he was describing some of the symptoms that people experience to me, and they really, at that point, you know, not really being close to the subject, they just sort of sounded very like surreal and animated in a way. It sounded like he was describing animated sequences to me, like people seeing the world through fractured glass, or people seeing the world upside down,
Right.
sort of objects morphing and moving and colors changing, and all of that. It sort of sounded to me like an animated sort of, yeah, sequence in a way.
Right. I picked up the word anime.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I say filmmaker, yeah, using that in the widest sense. I mean, I do animation, and before that I did and still do sort of commercial motion graphics and animation for advertising, promos, explainer films, and sort of TV title sequences and special effects. So lots of like post-production sort of fields and techniques that I use. And I'd made films with my friend Jai, who you know in Singapore, and we'd made sort of more abstract animations that were like sound visualizations. And I guess exploring animation in a more expressive way than just using it as a tool to maybe sell a product or communicate a specific idea. So when I met Sebastian Crutch, I really didn't necessarily think that I didn't necessarily think that I was in the best position to go ahead and make a film about a medical condition, about a very difficult condition. But he was really encouraging, and he just really liked the ideas that I had, and was very supportive, even when I was sort of thinking, I'm not sure where this is going. We tried to apply for funding from one or two places that we didn't get initially. And I wasn't sure whether the film was really going to happen, but then he kept encouraging me to come along to events. He, as well as doing medical research, he runs a very large network of, he runs one main support group, which are sort of regular events in London that invite people who have dementia or live with someone who has dementia or care for someone who has dementia to come and just be part of an event. And they do like talks and lectures that might discuss very practical issues of living with dementia. They might discuss sort of latest scientific research, or they might discuss, you know, maybe things like financial support, but they also invite people who do maybe come at it from a slightly different angle. So they have writers and artists might come and talk. And there's also the opportunity for people to have a cup of tea and lunch and meet other people. And I mean, that's sort of the strongest part of it, is people who live with dementia can meet other people who live with dementia. And everybody I've met there said that's the most important thing, that they can hear directly from other people who, like what their tips and what their experiences are and how they deal with everything from everyday problems to the sort of big, wider existential difficulties that come with a condition like dementia. So I was invited to these events, and from there I just started meeting people, and I got to present at one or two of the events, I presented the idea that me and Sebastian had started to develop, and the response was like really positive. It was almost more positive than I was about me making this film at first. For me, it was a very new experience, sort of making a documentary and meeting people. As an animator, I'm very often sort of shut away in a dark room, like working on stuff that's quite time consuming. And yeah, it was maybe slightly intimidating at first, but I got a very warm reception to the idea. And posterior cortical atrophy, the type of dementia that features in the film, is very rare. I think 1% of people that have Alzheimer's disease have posterior cortical atrophy. That's sort of quite a rough statistic. So there was a real sense of people who have been diagnosed with it and people whose family members have been diagnosed with it. There was a real sense that they wanted other people to know about it, and they wanted to explain this condition. And they also said they found it very hard to explain, because a lot of the people, like the difference between posterior cortical atrophy and the much more common Alzheimer's disease and Alzheimer's dementia, is that you can meet someone with posterior cortical atrophy and you can have a conversation with them, and you can maybe not notice that they have any kind of condition or impairment at all. But when you do speak to them and they tell you about, as you've seen in the film, something like making a cup of tea or going down the stairs, or just everyday sort of visual, practical, spatial tasks that we all take for granted, they start to really struggle with that, and that's where their symptoms kind of present. And I think I think I did a small test animation, and people really warmed to it. They were like, yeah, that explains exactly what I experience.
Right.
And from there, people literally came forward and said, I would really like to be part of your film. So really, before I'd sort of done too much animation, people were really open to sharing their stories with me. And from there, it felt like I couldn't not make this film. I was sort of, the ball had started rolling, and there seemed to be a very positive energy about doing something that raised awareness and something that people could share. And then from there, I regularly visited these support groups, and through that support group, there's a lot of local support groups where they may be much smaller, but they still offer the same thing, a chance for people living with dementia to meet other people who are living with dementia, and perhaps, provide some speakers or activities that encourage discussion and education around dementia, and around dementias in general. And I sort of traveled, I mean, I was living in London at the time, so I traveled a lot around London and to a few other parts of the country, and gradually built up a sort of an archive that I still have today of, I think it was over 10 hours of conversations with, directly with people who live with posterior cortical atrophy, this rare type of dementia.
Right.
And from there it was just about whittling it down to, I mean, I guess my focus, because as an animator, my focus was very much on the visual symptoms, which I think is something that works very well in the film. I mean, that's kind of the idea behind it, is sort of trying in some way to visualize what these people might experience, and to give people an idea of how that might be. And I mean, I think the whole thing for me it was definitely a new challenge. I'd never made a documentary before, not in that sort of I'd never really directed my own sort of narrative film before. So it was a real challenge. And at the same time, to be learning and discovering about, what the effects that dementia has on people's lives was not always easy to deal with. It was, it's a difficult subject. But yeah, the sort of warmth and positivity I got from the community of people that I met was a big part of my motivation to go through and eventually get to finishing the film.
Right. So now I ask you a personal question, right? Something more personal. As a filmmaker, what would you do if you were diagnosed with dementia?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And actually, I mean, I have I think we could delve into that question a lot, but I actually have quite a simple answer in that, I mean, I'm currently making 2 more films about rarer dementias that I've done interviews for, and that are kind of, one's sort of in production and one's in the early stages of production. But I've also during these projects, I've sort of built up lots of ideas for what I might do with dementia. And one thing I've always wanted to do is to, like, maybe as a filmmaker, to do a film with somebody else. This would be quite impractical, but to maybe have an ongoing project where I get somebody to maybe draw the same thing once a month over the period of maybe 5-10 years, and see how that drawing changed. One of the films I've made is more specific. The type of dementia is called primary progressive aphasia, and it presents mainly as sort of language symptoms and difficulties with remembering words and understanding words. And I sort of thought asking somebody to read a poem or a piece of text and just keep re-recording the same thing over and over again, and then you get to see the sort of the progression of the condition. So you might have somebody, the first line of the poem might be read as anybody else would, but gradually you would hear how the dementia is sort of affecting that person's speech and that poem. And I think the easiest way to do that would actually be if it was me who was reading the poem or drawing the pictures. And just sort of document the progression by doing one repetitive task. I mean, maybe it's sort of the seed of an idea rather than a complete idea, but I think maybe the inspiration for that idea is it's very difficult to document someone for that length of time. If you think of a film like Richard Linklater's Boyhood, where he used the same actors over 20 years to make one film, and you see the main character get older, but they film once every couple of years. And I think that sort of sense of progression and time is quite hard to capture. And maybe that's an idea that I might do myself if I was diagnosed.
Simon, interesting.
Simon, just to share with you, in regards to what you mentioned earlier, to document some tasks that you do daily and you shoot it across a length of time. So I just want to share something personal with you. So what I did was with my mom, who she has been signing her name, writing her name.
Right, okay.
5 years ago when she was diagnosed. So I want to get her to start, to be able to still have that that motor skill in writing. So, and I can see through the years, her signature starts to get very illegible. And and of late, I can see the writing start picking up again. So it's like a little up and down curve.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I think that's a very sort of it's not such a well-known. I mean, we think of dementia as maybe a progressively worse condition, but actually it fluctuates greatly, and perhaps more so across different types of dementia as well. One of the films that I'm making at the moment is about dementia with Lewy bodies. So it's a Parkinsonian dementia. It sort of has some very similar symptoms to Parkinson's disease, but one of the actual listed symptoms is fluctuations, which is quite a strange. It's not a symptom in itself, but it just means that the symptom, all the other symptoms can come and go almost instantaneously. You can have a good moment where somebody's sort of seemingly very lucid and rational, and within the same conversation, as I experienced when I was interviewing people, they can sort of change subject, or their trail of thought disappears somewhere that's quite hard to follow. And then the next moment they can be fine again. Or as people told me, they can maybe for 1 minute feel lost in their own house, and then the next moment be completely fine and not really aware of it. And that can be really problematic when going to a doctor where their symptoms aren't showing when they're with the doctor. And then as soon as they leave the doctor who said there isn't anything wrong with them, their symptoms start showing again. And yeah, this sort of, as you said, the fluctuations is a really big part of it. And I think I didn't really think about that with the idea of repeating, which it sounds like you're doing exactly the same. That would be, I think that would reveal that in a really interesting way.
So what do you think is worse? I mean, when you have no memories, or when you have many regrets when you hit maybe 80 years old, for example?
Yeah, another interesting question. I mean, my first thought, it would depend on what the regrets are. But I think it's probably better to have memories. I think the idea that your memories are taken away, I'd rather have bad memories that I could think about and share with people than the concept of no memory at all, if you see what I mean. And yeah, I mean, I think I suppose it's not really just memory. I mean, the film that I made and the films that I am making are all in connection with the rare dementia, the Dementia Research Centre in London, which they primarily focus on rarer dementias. So, I mean, it feels kind of strange, but I feel slightly ignorant to Alzheimer's disease because I've sort of immersed myself in a world of rarer conditions. Obviously, Alzheimer's is a huge part of, is the most common form of dementia. So, but I haven't really spent much time with anyone who has Alzheimer's. The people that I've worked with for my films have slightly different conditions, and it's not just memory. Like their memories can, like with posterior cortical atrophy in Do I See What You See, their memories are often very much intact, and they can tell you what happened yesterday and what happened last week and what happened in their childhood. But if you give them a plate of food, they probably can't quite see what it is, or have trouble sort of the function of just simply moving their arm to their mouth to eat is a problem.
Right.
But that starts to take away people's personalities. And I think that's the same. That can be memory, that can be sort of physical ability, that can be speech, as I said with the film about primary progressive aphasia or language dementias. You know, there are a lot of people who used to be, I mean, one person I interviewed used to be a songwriter. Many of them would read and write, and just basic conversation would start to be taken away from them. And that's not just one ability and one function. That's a huge part of who we are as people. And I would say probably memory more so than sort of maybe more physical symptoms. And in that sense, your personality is disappearing. And I mean, maybe I like to think that even if we do have some regrets, that those regrets are what make us sort of who we are in a way. And even the bad experiences in our lives or perhaps they even teach us more than the good and successful sort of memories that we have, and form who we are. And dementia in a way is gradually taking away personality. I think that's something I got quite strongly from a lot of the partners that I spoke to, the people who were caring for people with dementia, who were seeing this sort of gradual fluctuating degeneration, that the things that people used to really enjoy and the things that were sort of a strong part of their characters and personality were sort of gradually being lost. And that was sort of the most difficult thing, apart from practical everyday things such as, you know, getting lost or, you know, forgetting where you put your car keys. That sort of, that idea of losing personality, I think is very tragic.
I think you're absolutely right, because if I could share my story, is that I've been a caregiver for my father for the last 11 years, and that fluctuation is very real. And beyond that lens of dementia, there's still the character, the identity, the personality that makes a daddy who he is. And if dementia slowly eats that away, actually his quality of life is not as good as before. And that's exactly what you pointed out. And I think that is important for us to know as well. And I totally agree with you. Yeah, Danny.
I just want to add on to what Daniel and you have just said. I just suddenly remember this quote from a book. It goes something like this: I love missing the person who is still here. And I thought it's quite sad.
I love missing the
person who is still here.
Yeah, what's the context of the quote?
Okay, it's about the father and son. The father has dementia, so the son is saying, I love missing this person who is still here. How can you miss a person when the person is still here? But the person is not here. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. I think that's what he's trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's a strange thing to say, I love missing the person. That suggests, a kind of, maybe a sort of a nostalgia for that person to a certain extent, perhaps. I mean, it's hard to know how to respond to that, because I think maybe I mean, I always feel that, you know, I do have a certain disconnection to or maybe disconnection is the wrong word. You know, I'm coming at it from somebody who hasn't experienced dementia firsthand within either myself or within my family, and I think that sense of spending time with someone as a carer, it sounds like something that you're both still have experienced or are experiencing. Those emotions are quite, I would say, are quite hard for me to understand. As much as I've done many interviews with people who have experienced it, I think it's very different when you're experiencing it very firsthand, as it were. But do you both find that the idea of presence, somebody being present, is an interesting thing, that they're there physically but then they're not? And also, I imagine the idea of a condition fluctuating also makes that strange, in the sense that one day they can sort of seem closer to their normal selves after a week of finding it very difficult, and then all of a sudden they're just sort of the same again. One person I interviewed who had dementia with Lewy Bodies in the current film that I'm making, he talked a lot about how the initial symptoms were very random. Like, there would just be one strange incident every 3 months or every 6 months, and then gradually these incidents became more and more common, to the point that they went and they got a diagnosis, and then towards the end, it was almost like the fluctuations had inverted, where she didn't talk much. One of the symptoms is more physical. You lose sort of the muscle ability in your face, so you don't really use facial expressions anymore. he said there were one or two moments where I think he described one moment where they were actually listening to music, and his wife stood up and said that she had been like in a complete fog, and all of a sudden for maybe like 10 minutes she was her face sort of lit up again, and she was laughing and they danced, and then within 10 minutes she'd sort of regressed back again into what was at this point her sort of more normal state of not really being very active, and not saying anything, and I think that idea of if you spend regular time with somebody, to see that fluctuation, it gives you more of a stronger sense that their personality is still there somewhere. It's just how do you connect with that? I mean, maybe you would have a better answer than me.
I'm just thinking, as a filmmaker, because I kind of make short little films too, I think it will be very exciting if we can be able to go into their world and see what they can see.
Yeah, which is
wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting challenge, because I always feel that there's a friend that I know who's an acquaintance, another documentary filmmaker, and he's doing a PhD, and he's writing a lot about the ethics of documentary filmmaking. And I think this is really relevant when you're making films about dementia. And it's a question that I always have in my head as I'm making the current films, and as I was making the last films, is to what extent, particularly with animation, where you're sort of creating quite, the illustrations that I do and the animation that I do is very subjective. It's not the same as filming something where you film a room and everybody can see it's a room. It's sort of, I can choose what colors to use. I can choose, I build everything from scratch. How big something is in the frame, how small it is, how fast it moves. And I'm making all these very like minute decisions. And I'm thinking to myself, to what extent am I speaking for these people? Which I think is maybe problematic in terms of it's certainly sort of an ethical debate around documentaries, is to what extent, in Do I See What You See, to what extent does that really, would people say that really happens? And maybe it's sort of one of those questions that you can't really answer. And I certainly felt as I was producing Do I See What You See, that I wanted to tell their story as best I could. And sometimes, like the deeper ethical questions, you don't want to get paralyzed as you're producing work. So you just have to sort of make it and see how people respond. And people have responded very positively. Sebastian Crutch still uses the film as part of the work that he does. And he says not one person has stood up and said, this film doesn't represent my experience of posterior cortical atrophy. It's always been positive. But there is an interesting question, and one of the symptoms of dementia with Lewy bodies, which I'm making a film about now, is visual hallucinations. And I'm really I'm sort of in the middle of visualizing through animation people's hallucinations. And to what extent is that right, if you see what I mean? I mean, I'm trying to build a sense of what it must be like to see visual hallucinations to the people that have them are very, very real, to the point that they sometimes reach out and try to touch them. But if somebody says they see a person and I draw a person, is that me saying this is what it looks like, or is that what somebody with dementia believes it looks like? And at some point during the process, I intend to return to the people I've interviewed and show them what I've produced. And I think that's quite important, to try and involve people with dementia as much as possible. Like participation, I think, is it's a positive thing for people just to have fun and be engaged with film and creative projects. But I also think it's very easy. It'd be very easy for me to make a film without considering that at all, if you see what I mean. Like, to what extent am I speaking for people with dementia, when actually what we really want to hear from, and obviously we do through the interviews, we want to hear as much as possible, you know, first-hand experiences, and let them speak, because people with dementia, certainly in the early phases, are perfectly capable of living a normal life and communicating what they're experiencing. And I think that there was in England, there's a common phrase where people say nothing about us without us. So you, nothing about people with dementia without including people who have dementia. And it's an issue for the scientists that I've sort of worked with on the projects that I'm doing. It's an issue for their research as well. To what extent, how much can their research be specific? I mean, how much of a judgment can they make when they do analysis of one person who has, say, Alzheimer's or dementia, aphasia, or posterior cortical atrophy? How much can they say they do tests on these people and they diagnose them, but how much is that person's symptoms the same as somebody else's symptoms? And actually, there's a great quote, I think, from Oliver Sacks, who says, "Ask not what disease the person has, but what person has the disease." So it's more about the person, and you know, again, from my experience of doing many interviews, that people's experience, you can read about a condition and you can read the symptoms, but actually people's experiences are quite unique, because our brains are so individually, you know, our life experiences are so individually wired that it's very hard to say that one person with Alzheimer's would experience exactly the same as somebody else with Alzheimer's. And that's even more the case for rarer dementias, where there's been much less research, that it's quite hard to put them into categories. I feel like I've gone on a strange tangent here that I can't remember exactly what the start point was.
But I hear you totally, because I think that's the spin, and that's the amazing part of imagination, because even with hallucinations, there could be a positive spin to it, there could be a negative spin to it. I think the storytelling is really is the voice representative of the person you're representing for. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you absolutely put it right in that light, because with Daddy, I give an example, is like, I think that this is the way I should be caring for my father, but he turns around and says that, look, I think you're over caring for me because I don't need all this stuff. Then I realized that, oops, you know, maybe I didn't ask him how he likes to be cared for. So it's exactly how you put it. I mean, I felt goosebumps coming out when you were telling me about
right.
You know, whatever we are saying. Are we saying it on behalf of them? Are we saying it in an ethical way for them? I mean, that caught me really quite deeply. Thank you for that. I mean, that was something that I wouldn't have brought it out better than you did.
So Simon, if you need Asian stories for your documentary, you know who to go to.
Yeah. It sounds like you guys have
tons of stories to share with you.
Yeah, it's interesting. Is there it was something when I was in Singapore. I was there last September working on a project with Jai. I was there for a whole month, and it was during the time of the Festival of the Hungry Ghosts,
which is now.
Which is now, yes. So it was a year ago that I was there, actually. Yeah, that's right. It was almost a year ago to the day that I first arrived, and I found it's not something that I really explored beyond my own thoughts, but I got a real sense. Maybe this is a colonial stereotype in my head. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there seems to be a very strong sense of family and respect for ancestors. I don't think there's anything quite like the Festival of the Hungry Ghost that I can think of from where I'm from in England or Germany, and that sense of sort of generational connection that, again, from my distant reading, I know in Japan is quite significant. Respect for older people, families sort of maybe living together for like different generations living together for longer. I sort of wondered if there was like, that's an interesting
Angle.
That's interesting when you think about that cultural element in terms of people's experiences of dementia, because it is a sort of, you get these sort of family generational dilemmas and connections that happen as a result of dementia. I don't know, did that just sound, I'm not sure how that sounded. Did that make any sense?
Yeah. So, next question. What do you want to tell the world? What do you want to tell the world when you have dementia?
When I have dementia, or
when you have when you are diagnosed with dementia, what do you want to shout out to the world?
I think, I mean, on a sort of simple and fairly obvious answer, it is to raise awareness, particularly through my experiences of working with scientists and people who've been diagnosed with rare dementias. It's a very complicated condition, dementia. I mean, dementia is sort of an umbrella term for, I think there's over 100 recognized types of dementia, Alzheimer's dementia being by far the most common, but that there's a lot more to it than what I think is what I would say is the general knowledge and what you hear about when you know, sort of the opinions of dementia that you might read about or hear about in like in the media and just the general conversation. There's actually a lot more to it. And I think from that sense is there's a lot of fascinating information to learn from it, about how our brains work and how we are as people, sort of on a scientific level, but also on a sort of psychological level as well, like what makes us who we are. But I think if I had dementia, I would hope that people realize that I'm essentially still me, and that I probably wouldn't want to be treated differently. I mean, I think it's very difficult when talking about dementia, because people at different stages of dementia sort of require, they have sort of different needs and different abilities. And obviously there are people who get to stages where, you know, almost everything has to be done for them. But certainly early on, people like to be visited, engaged, social. They still like to experience the world as much as they can. It doesn't necessarily, it takes away from who you are, but it doesn't change who you are. Maybe I'm sort of generalizing too much there.
So don't treat you differently.
Exactly. Yeah. Have you asked other people that question?
Yes.
What am I allowed? Do I have to wait until everything's published online to hear the other answers?
No. Actually, most of them say the same thing as you.
Uh-huh.
Do not treat me differently.
Yeah.
But be sensitive to my feelings. If I make mistakes, it's not because I want to, it's because I can't help it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there was something that I can't remember where it was. Maybe it was just sort of researching online, but I listened to something that said, for example, someone with Alzheimer's, or it's quite common for someone with Alzheimer's to perhaps start talking about their parents who, you know, if somebody has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, they're probably certainly over 50, probably over 60 or 70. And for them to be talking about their parents, you sort of know that they're talking about someone who's no longer alive. And there's sort of always this dilemma, and it's similar, for example, with the hallucinations, is should you tell someone that their parents, should you be honest and say, your parents are no longer with us, they've passed away? Or should you try and play along a little bit and say, oh, your parents aren't going to be here today? And actually, the best advice, one of the best pieces of advice that I got was was when you hear somebody talking about their parents or their children, or somebody who's not there, that maybe that person, the person with Alzheimer's, believes is there, is to maybe ask them questions about their parents, to say, oh, did you have a good relationship with your father? Or what's your favorite memory of your father? Because maybe that thought is coming, it's coming from somewhere that shows that that person is thinking about their parents. And it's coming out in a way that suggests they believe their parents might still be alive, which you can say is false till you're blue in the face. But the reality is that person is thinking about their parents. And you can invite conversation about that might sort of calm them down, or give them a warm feeling about their thoughts, rather than trying to contradict their thoughts. Yes. If you see what I mean.
I think that's an awesome tip, because a lot of times it's about having that ability to still converse with the person you love. And I think you rightly put it in that sense that if there's still an ability to enable them to have conversations with us on a powerful setting, I think that's really, it doesn't really matter what they're recalling. Is really to actually have a dialogue and say that, hey, what do you remember? What can you tell me about this? Because you're telling me things that I would have known about my great grandparents. If my dad remembers his grandparents.
Yeah.
So actually, I think of it as my dad is my human library. So I go to him and say, hey, where did we used to live? Can you tell me about your childhood? I never experienced that. So that was something that, at least I hear it from him. Yeah, he can still articulate that. And whether is it half truths, whether is it 90% that doesn't exist, but at least he tell me his version of the truth. And I appreciated that. So on good days, we talk about things about happiness. On bad days, we can't even have a conversation on what do you want to eat. So for me, I think whatever conversations I have with my dad, I think it is still very important to me. I hold it very dearly, because when he eventually leaves, I wouldn't have any of these conversations left other than in my memory. Yeah.
So if memories can be frozen, wouldn't that be great?
Yeah, so audio files and audio memories, I think these are awesome, because that's where film tells a story. That's where animation tells a story, and the work that you do, I think that's memory itself for us to keep. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
I just want to share something. I believe for people living with dementia, there are still moments of high intelligence in them. Let Daniel share with you an example about his dad taking the lift, pressing the button. Okay, before that, I want to ask you, Simon, in London or in Berlin, in the lift, the buttons, I believe there are arrows up and down, right?
Yes.
Or how does it work?
I mean, I think normally you have numbers and you just put the number in, I think.
Okay, maybe then you want to share that.
So we live in a multi-story apartment in Singapore. So we live on level 12. So when Daddy wants to go out, so we usually press down because we want to go down, right? But Daddy, his version of how he talks to the elevator, or what he wants the elevator to do, is to come up. So he says, "I'll press up. I want the elevator to come up to me." But so I'll respond to him and say, "Daddy, but we want to go down. It's what we want to do." So we press down. So we ended up. Yeah, we ended up in an argument, but at the end, I realized that actually his version of logic actually makes a bit of sense, because he wants the elevator to come up to him. So that was something that my realization is that, before I jump into quick conclusions, actually, I would want to understand why he's saying certain things now. So when he tells me certain things now, it's like, I want to get this done. I want to do it this way. I say, can you explain to me why you want to do that? So that helps me to better understand my dad in a way that I never could when I was much younger. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that shows perfectly good logic, as far as I can see.
And I couldn't dispute that, right? So
yeah.
Did you manage to get out of the building though? We did, but it took a while.
Took a while.
So, when you keep pressing up and down, the lift wouldn't understand what we wanted to do, right? So, yeah.
Any more questions?
We put most of them up. Maybe what you can do for us is if you can do a quick shout out for people to attend the festival and catch the film. I think that would be quite nice. So the film as well as the festival is called the Enabling Festival 2020. So if you can string that into a quick shout out, that would be wonderful for us to use and cut as videos. Yeah.
Sure. Hi everyone, my name's Simon Ball. I'm the director of a film called Do I See What You See, which is being featured as part of this year's Enabling Festival 2020. I hope to see you there, and good luck.
Hi, I'm Daniel.
I'm Danny.
And we're the co-founders of the Enabling Festival 2020.
Yeah, the Enabling Festival is in its third year now, and it certainly has been a long but rewarding journey.
At this note, we hope you can support us by pledging $1 or more to the Enabling Festival 2020. We've got this link right down below here.
Yeah, this pledge will enable the festival to further the cause and implement more initiatives for a collective impact which has societal benefits for the dementia community and caregivers.
Dementia is a very real issue that could happen to you and me. We sincerely appeal to you to walk this journey with us.
So come and participate in the various programs that we have lined up for you, and we hope to see you online at the Enabling Festival 2020. Thank you.
Thank you for watching our program. We hope you can help us to fill in a simple survey using the QR code provided at the end of the program. Now, this will help us to improve as well as to fulfill our funding requirements from our various funders. Please help. Now, if you have any questions or if you wish to find out more about the Enabling Festival 2020, please visit our Facebook page, Instagram, and website to see what we have lined up for you. Drop us a message on any of the social media platforms. You can also write to enablingfestival@gmail.com, and our colleagues will reply to you as soon as they can. Take care and stay safe.
When we cannot see, doesn't mean